Radiation. It's invisible, intangible, and for much of history, completely misunderstood. For over a century, this invisible force has been both a marvel and a menace, responsible for groundbreaking discoveries, but also harrowing tragedies. This is a story of human curiosity, recklessness, and resilience, a cautionary tale of radiation. What is radiation? Radiation is the energy released from atoms in the form of particles or waves. It exists all around us in many forms, from the sunlight that warms our planet to the radioactive materials deep within the Earth. But not all radiation is created equal. There are two main types: non-ionizing and ionizing radiation. Non-ionizing radiation, like radio waves and visible light, is relatively harmless. Ionizing radiation, however, carries enough energy to remove electrons from atoms, potentially damaging cells and DNA. This type includes gamma rays, X-rays, and particles from radioactive decay. It's this powerful ionizing radiation that would captivate scientists, spark revolutions in medicine and technology, and leave behind a trail of both brilliance and tragedy. The dawn of radiation. Our story begins in the late 19th century, when science was on the brink of a revolutionary discovery. In 1898, Marie Curie and her husband Pierre isolated two previously unknown elements: polonium, named after Marie's native Poland, and radium. Marie's work involved isolating radium and studying its remarkable properties. She coined the term radioactivity and demonstrated how radioactive elements emitted energy spontaneously. This discovery had profound implications for physics, chemistry, and medicine, particularly in cancer treatment. Marie Curie's accomplishments earned her 2 Nobel Prizes, one in physics, 1903, alongside Pierre and Henri Becquerel, and another in chemistry, 1911, for her isolation of radium. She was the first person to receive Nobel Prizes in 2 different scientific fields, a feat still unparalleled today. Marie Curie's death, the cost of discovery. Marie Curie's groundbreaking research came at a significant personal cost. In her time, the dangers of radiation exposure were not understood. She often handled radioactive materials directly, carrying vials of radium in her pockets and working with them in poorly ventilated laboratories. Radium's luminous glow fascinated her, and she frequently kept samples on her desk, unaware of the harm they caused. Prolonged exposure to radioactive materials took a severe toll on her health. By the 1920s, Marie began to suffer from symptoms consistent with radiation poisoning, including fatigue, cataracts, and chronic illnesses. In 1934, she died of aplastic anemia, a condition where the bone marrow fails to produce enough blood cells. This illness is now understood to be directly linked to her years of exposure to ionizing radiation. Even in death, Marie Curie's exposure to radiation left a lasting mark. Her personal belongings, including her notebooks and laboratory equipment, remain so radioactive that they are stored in lead-lined boxes and can only be handled with protective equipment. Yet, radium was hailed as a miracle element. It was marketed as a cure-all, added to toothpaste, water, and even chocolates. Little did people know, the same substance they believed could invigorate their lives would also harm or kill them. Radium fever, a miracle substance. By the early 20th century, radium fever had taken hold. It was marketed as a miracle cure for everything from arthritis to impotence. Radium-infused water, toothpaste, face creams, and even chocolates promised vitality and beauty. Advertisements touted radium as a life-enhancing substance, and consumers eagerly embraced these glowing products. One especially infamous product was Radithor, a tonic containing radioactive water. Wealthy industrialist Eben Byers drank bottles of it daily, believing it would boost his health. Instead, it destroyed his jaw and ultimately led to his death. A gruesome cautionary tale of the blind trust placed in corporate promises. The Radium Girls, a tragic workforce. Amid this radium craze, factories sprang up to meet the growing demand for luminous watch dials, which glowed in the dark thanks to radium paint. These glowing war watches were essential for soldiers during World War I. But the true cost was borne by the workers, young women employed in these factories, who came to be known as the Radium Girls. These women were instructed to use a technique called lip dip paint. They would dip their brushes into radium paint, bring the brush to a fine point by rolling it on their lips, and then paint the watch dials. Managers assured them the paint was harmless. In fact, some workers even painted their nails, teeth, and faces for fun, delighting in their glowing appearance. What they didn't know was that radium was accumulating in their bodies. Radium behaves similarly to calcium, so their bones absorbed it, leading to horrifying conditions like necrosis of the jaw, now known as radium jaw, and devastating cancers. Some women's bodies became so saturated with radium that their bones glowed in the dark, even after death. Autopsies revealed shocking details. The corpses of these women were still radioactive years later. The Radium Girls' illnesses were initially dismissed by factory owners, who denied any connection between radium exposure and the women's suffering. Doctors were often complicit, misdiagnosing the symptoms or outright lying to protect corporate interests. It wasn't until the mid-1920s that a group of Radium Girls, led by women like Grace Fryer, decided to fight back. They filed lawsuits against the United States Radium Corporation, seeking justice for their injuries. The legal battle was grueling, with the company employing underhanded tactics to discredit the women and avoid liability. But the Radium Girls persisted, and their case became a landmark moment in labor rights and workplace safety. Their bravery led to stricter regulations on radioactive substances and better protections for workers. The Chernobyl nuclear plant disaster. April 26, 1986. The night was supposed to be routine, a simple safety test at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Soviet Ukraine. Instead, it became the stage for one of the most catastrophic nuclear disasters in history. The test began late at night, inside Reactor 4. Engineers wanted to simulate a power outage and see if the reactor could cool itself without external power. But design flaws and operator errors quickly turned the experiment into a nightmare. The RBMK reactor design used at Chernobyl was dangerously unstable at low power. Operators disabled safety systems to run the test and reduced power too quickly, making the reactor highly unstable. When they tried to increase power again, a sudden surge caused a steam explosion. The blast blew apart the 1,000-ton reactor lid, exposing the core. Fires erupted, and a second explosion spewed even more radioactive material into the atmosphere. The explosion and fire released deadly radioactive isotopes, iodine-131, cesium-137, and strontium-90. The fallout was 400 times larger than the Hiroshima bomb. Soviet authorities downplayed the disaster, delaying evacuation, Residents of Pripyat, 49,000 people, were evacuated 36 hours later. In the following weeks, 116,000 more were relocated, and a 30-kilometer exclusion zone was established. But it was too late. Radiation spread across Europe, contaminating Belarus, Russia, Ukraine, and even Western Europe. The immediate toll was devastating. 2 workers died instantly, and 28 emergency responders succumbed to acute radiation sickness within months. The long-term health effects were even more tragic. Thousands of children developed thyroid cancer due to iodine-131 exposure. Estimates of total deaths range from 4,000 to 60,000, depending on the source. Today, the 2,600 square kilometer exclusion zone remains largely uninhabited. But wildlife has reclaimed the area, turning it into an unintentional refuge for nature. Chernobyl has also become a site for dark tourism, attracting thousands of visitors each year. Radiation levels have dropped, and most areas are safe for short visits. Still, around 200 self-settlers, mostly elderly residents, have returned to live in the zone. Chernobyl exposed critical flaws in nuclear safety and Soviet-era governance. It sparked global reforms, led by the International Atomic Energy Agency, to improve reactor designs and emergency protocols. It also sparked fear and debate about the safety of nuclear energy. Decades later, its story continues to captivate and caution us. A radiation tragedy in Brazil. In the heart of Brazil, in a city brimming with life and warmth, an invisible killer awakened. It crept through Goiânia, not with the roar of an explosion or the chaos of sirens, but in silence, in shimmering beauty, and in death. We'll now discuss the story of the Goiânia radiation disaster, one of the most tragic nuclear accidents in human history, though it happened far from the shadow of any power plant or nuclear reactor. It began, as so many tragedies do, with ignorance, desperation, and a small, fateful decision. In 1987, the Instituto Goiano de Radioterapia, a derelict radiotherapy clinic, sat forgotten on the outskirts of Goiânia. Within its crumbling walls lay a machine. Abandoned and overlooked, a teletherapy unit containing cesium-137, a highly radioactive isotope. To the untrained eye, it was just junk. But for 2 men, scavenging for scrap metal to sell, it was opportunity. They didn't know the danger they had unearthed as they dismantled the machine and carted it away. Inside the machine, encased in layers of lead and steel, was a capsule of cesium chloride. When exposed, it emitted a mesmerizing blue glow, a light so alluring it seemed like magic. That glow would become a siren's call, drawing people closer, enticing them to touch, to hold, to marvel. But what they held in their hands was not magic. It was poison, deadly and invisible. Cesium-137 emitted gamma rays, penetrating flesh and bone, destroying cells, and unleashing suffering beyond imagination. The capsule was sold to a scrapyard, where its glow captivated the owner and his family. They broke it apart, shared it with friends, even painted their skin with the glowing dust, laughing, playing, and celebrating the strange beauty of this newfound treasure. And so the radiation spread, unseen and unrelenting. Children played with it, neighbors carried it home, and entire families unwittingly became exposed. The first signs were subtle: nausea, dizziness, burns that refused to heal. Then, as days turned to weeks, the true horror emerged. Hair fell out in clumps. Skin blistered and peeled. Internal organs began to fail. It wasn't until one of the victims, a young woman named Maria Gabriela Ferreira, brought the strange glowing substance to a health clinic that the truth began to surface. Her symptoms, and those of her family, were a puzzle that doctors struggled to solve, until one doctor recognized the signature of radiation poisoning. By then, it was too late. When authorities finally intervened, it was chaos. Homes were demolished, soil was removed, and over 112,000 people were tested for radiation exposure. Hundreds were contaminated. 4 people died directly from acute radiation syndrome, including a beautiful 6-year-old girl named Legacies, who had unknowingly played with the glowing dust and eaten a sandwich while her hands were coated in it. Heartbreakingly, her small coffin, lined with lead, became a grim symbol of the tragedy. And though the immediate disaster ended, the scars remained, emotional, physical, and environmental. The Goiânia disaster is another scary reminder of the dangers of radiation, how it can slip into the cracks of everyday life, unnoticed until it's too late. More importantly, it's a story of human fragility, how curiosity, poverty, and ignorance can collide with the unimaginable power of science gone awry. It's a reminder that danger doesn't always roar like a lion. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it glows. A cautionary legacy. From Marie Curie, who unknowingly handled deadly radium, to the Radium Girls, whose glowing paint sealed their fate. From the Goiânia incident, where an abandoned radioactive capsule poisoned an entire city block, to the shadow of Chernobyl, which still lingers decades later. These stories paint a stark picture. Radiation has revolutionized medicine, industry, and energy. It has given us the power to treat cancer, explore space, and light our cities. But it has also left a path of destruction in its wake. When wielded recklessly, when misunderstood, or when its dangers are ignored. These tragedies remind us that science is not inherently good or evil. Only our choices determine the outcome. Radiation will always be a part of our world. The question is whether we will respect its power, or fall victim to it once again. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more fascinating and strange stories. Hit the bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching.